April 18, 1943, 430 miles from Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, a Mitsubishi G4M bomber cuts through the morning sky at 8,000 feet. Inside sits Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant architect of Pearl Harbor, commander of Japan's combined fleet, the man who had sworn to dictate peace terms in Washington itself. He has less than 60 seconds to live. Behind him, closing at 350 miles per hour, American P-38 Lightning fighters are already lining up their shots, and Yamamoto has no idea they're there. What's about to unfold will become one of the most audacious precision strikes in military history, a mission so improbable that when Japanese investigators finally measured the distances involved, calculated the fuel requirements, and plotted the intercept angles, they refused to believe it was even possible. The Americans had built a fighter that could hunt across distances no interceptor should reach, flown by pilots who could navigate 400 miles of open ocean without landmarks, without radios, without error, and arrive exactly on time to the minute. This is the story of that mission and the extraordinary aircraft that made it possible. The story begins 5 days earlier, not with aircraft or weapons, but with a message. On April 13, 1943, American cryptanalysts at Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor intercepted a routine Japanese naval transmission. What they decoded sent shockwaves through Pacific Command. Admiral Yamamoto was planning an inspection tour of forward bases in the Solomon Islands, and the Japanese had transmitted every detail American intelligence needed. Departure time from Rabaul, arrival time at Balalai airfield near Bougainville, aircraft types, escort composition, everything. It was an intelligence gift so perfect, it seemed like a trap. The decoded message reached Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, within hours. The decision he faced was unprecedented. Authorizing an assassination of an enemy commander raised complex ethical questions. What about retaliation? What about the rules of warfare? But Yamamoto wasn't just any commander. He was the strategic genius behind Pearl Harbor, the planner of Japan's entire naval war strategy. His tactical brilliance had made him a legend in Japan and a priority target for America. President Franklin Roosevelt's authorization came swiftly and simply: get Yamamoto. The mission fell to the Army Air Force's 339th Fighter Squadron, the Flying Knights, stationed at Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. But from the moment planning began, the obstacles seemed insurmountable. Balalai Airfield lay 435 miles northwest across open ocean. No navigation landmarks. Japanese-held islands dotted the entire route, bristling with coastal observers who would report any American formation. The intercept window was brutally narrow. Yamamoto's bomber would be vulnerable for perhaps 10 minutes during its approach. Most critically, no American fighter based at Batam. Guadalcanal had the range to reach Bougainville and return. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat had a combat radius of roughly 175 miles, not even close. The newer F-4U Corsair could theoretically manage 400 miles, but only if pilots maintained perfect fuel efficiency, never climbed to combat altitude, never maneuvered aggressively. Any combat would mean ditching in shark-infested waters. Only one aircraft in the American inventory could make the journey: the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The P-38 Lightning was unlike anything else in the sky. With its twin-boom configuration, tricycle landing gear, and counter-rotating propellers, it looked more like an experimental prototype than a frontline fighter. Japanese pilots allegedly called it Futago no Akuma, the fork-tailed devil, though no verified wartime source confirms this nickname. Regardless, the name stuck, and on April 18th, what mattered wasn't its fearsome reputation, but a single capability: Budge. The Lightning's twin Allison V1710 engines, each producing 1,475 horsepower, gave it exceptional endurance. With standard internal fuel of 410 gallons plus two 165-gallon drop tanks, the P-38 could theoretically fly 1,150 miles. But theory and combat reality were very different things. This mission required flying at wave-top altitude to avoid radar, navigating with absolute precision across featureless ocean, climbing to attack altitude on arrival, engaging superior numbers of enemy fighters, and returning home with enough fuel reserve to avoid ditching. Everything had to be perfect. Any error meant failure or death. Major John Mitchell, commanding the 339th Fighter Squadron, was assigned to plan and lead the mission. A taciturn combat veteran with 9 confirmed victories, Mitchell approached the problem with cold, mathematical precision. His navigation solution was brilliant in its simplicity, but brutal in its demands. He plotted a dogleg course, taking the formation west toward the Russell Islands, then northwest on a compass heading of 305 degrees. By staying low, between 10 and 50 feet above the waves, the P-38s would remain below Japanese radar coverage while avoiding known observation posts. But flying compass headings over open ocean with no visual reference points required navigation skills that bordered on supernatural. Wind drift could push aircraft miles off course. Compass errors of even a few degrees would compound over 435 miles. Mitchell calculated that to arrive within visual range, close enough to see the target, his navigation error could not exceed 1 degree over the entire 2-hour flight. The fuel calculations were equally unforgiving. At optimal cruise settings, the P-38s would burn roughly 140 gallons per hour. The outbound leg would consume approximately 280 gallons. Climbing to attack altitude and combat would burn another 100 gallons. The return flight would require another 280 gallons. Total, 660 gallons, leaving roughly 115 gallons reserve, enough for, perhaps, 30 minutes of flight. Mitchell planned for strict radio silence, cruise at 185 mph, indicated airspeed, and zero unnecessary maneuvering. Every climb, every turn, every burst of throttle consumed fuel they couldn't spare. On the evening of April 17th, Mitchell briefed the mission to 18 selected pilots. When he revealed the target's identity, the room went absolutely silent. Captain Thomas Lanphier later recalled, "This wasn't just another intercept. This was a chance to eliminate the man who planned Pearl Harbor." The mission profile was straightforward in concept, nightmarish in execution. 12 P-38s would form the high cover element, protecting against Japanese interceptors. 4 P-38s, the killer flight, would engage Yamamoto's bombers directly. Mitchell would navigate and control the formation. Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber would make the actual intercept. Each Lightning would carry full internal fuel, 2 165-gallon drop tanks, 4.50 caliber machine guns with 500 rounds each, and one 20mm cannon with 150 rounds. Total takeoff weight, over 18,000 pounds. The heaviest the P-38s had ever flown operationally. The pilots knew the odds. Any mechanical failure, any navigation error, any unexpected headwind meant they wouldn't come home. But the target was worth the risk. At 7:13 a.m. on April 18, 1943, 18 P-38 Lightnings thundered down Henderson Field's steel matting runway and climbed into clear morning air. The formation descended to wavetop altitude and turned northwest. Below them, the Pacific stretched empty and blue to the horizon. No landmarks, no navigation aids, just Mitchell's compass, a stopwatch, and a rendezvous that had to be perfect to the minute. The P-38's configuration made this possible. The twin-boom design placed engines far from the fuselage, dramatically reducing cockpit noise and vibration. Pilots could fly for hours without the physical fatigue that plagued single-engine fighter pilots. The liquid-cooled Allison engines maintained consistent temperatures indefinitely, unlike air-cooled radials that required constant temperature management. The turbo superchargers maintained manifold pressure at altitude without parasitic power losses. This efficiency translated directly into range and survival. The formation maintained absolute radio silence as they crossed the 200-mile mark. Mitchell checked his navigation constantly, comparing compass heading against drift indicators, verifying airspeed and fuel consumption against his flight plan. At 185 mph indicated, the Lightning formation was making roughly 220 mph over water, accounting for wind. At 8:33 a.m., 1 hour and 20 minutes into the flight, the southern coast of Bougainville appeared ahead, exactly where Mitchell's calculations predicted. The navigation error, over 435 miles, less than 2 miles. They had arrived precisely on schedule, precisely on target. Then someone spotted the enemy formation. At 9:34 a.m., within 1 minute of the predicted intercept time, Mitchell's wingman called out 2 formations of aircraft approaching from the north. Yamamoto's transport, precisely on schedule, exactly where American intelligence predicted, flying straight toward them at 8,000 feet. Admiral Yamamoto's transport consisted of 2 Mitsubishi G4M bombers and 6 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters. Yamamoto rode in the lead bomber, piloted by Chief Warrant Officer Kotani. His Chief of Staff, Vice Admiral Ugaki, occupied the second bomber. The Zero escorts were among Japan's best fighters, flown by experienced pilots from the 204th Air Group. Fast, maneuverable, deadly, the Zero had dominated Pacific skies for 18 months. The Japanese pilots, unaware that American fighters had penetrated this deep into their defensive perimeter, maintained a relaxed escort formation. They had no idea what was about to happen. Mitchell's formation jettisoned drop tanks and split immediately. The 12-plane cover group climbed to engage the Zero fighters. The 4-plane killer flight, Lanphier, Barber, and their wingmen went after the bombers. What happened in the next 90 seconds remains one of the most debated engagements in aviation history. Lieutenant Rex Barber's combat report described approaching the trailing bomber from behind and below. At approximately 200 yards range, Barber opened fire with all guns. 450 caliber machine guns and 120 mm cannon poured concentrated fire into the bomber's right engine and fuselage. The G4M, nicknamed Hamaki or cigar by Japanese crews for its tendency to ignite when damaged, erupted in flames. Simultaneously, Captain Thomas Lanphier engaged the lead bomber carrying Yamamoto. As the pilot attempted evasive maneuvers, Lanphier's guns raked the aircraft from engine to tail. The left engine exploded. The bomber's wings separated. The aircraft entered an uncontrolled descent into the jungle below. Above them, the cover flight engaged 6 Zero fighters in a swirling dogfight. The P-38's superior speed and firepower offset the Zero's maneuverability advantage. Lieutenant Besby Holmes destroyed 1 Zero. The remaining Japanese fighters, shocked by the sudden appearance of American aircraft 400 miles from the nearest Allied base, broke off to protect the surviving bomber. The entire engagement lasted less than 3 minutes from initial contact to disengagement. Mitchell, monitoring fuel states, ordered the formation to break off and head for home. The return flight tested every pilot's discipline. Lieutenant Raymond Hine ran his tanks dry on the return journey. His aircraft went down at sea. He was never found, a grim reminder of how narrow the fuel margins truly were. The remaining 17 P-38s landed at Henderson Field, with fuel gauges showing near empty. Total mission time, 3 hours and 10 minutes. Distance flown, 870 miles. Mitchell's navigation and fuel planning had proven flawless under the most demanding conditions imaginable. The immediate aftermath was confusion. American pilots knew they'd engaged bombers and escort fighters. They knew both bombers had been destroyed. But Yamamoto's fate wasn't confirmed until Japanese radio intercepts revealed unprecedented morning broadcasts from Tokyo. The Japanese Navy's official announcement came on May 21st, more than a month after the attack. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto had perished in combat over Bougainville while directing operations. The announcement shocked Japan. Yamamoto was the nation's most celebrated naval commander, a strategic genius whose reputation approached mythical status. Japanese reaction revealed the psychological impact. Initial reports blamed the loss on bad luck, an unfortunate encounter with routine American patrol aircraft. But as details emerged, Japanese intelligence officers confronted disturbing implications. American fighters had appeared 435 miles from their base at exactly the predicted time, at exactly the predicted location. This suggested something far more troubling. The Americans had broken Japanese naval codes. Investigation teams reaching the crash site near Bougainville found Yamamoto's body still strapped in his seat, thrown clear when the bomber disintegrated on impact. Medical examination revealed he'd been killed instantly. The debate over whether Lanphier's or Barber's guns delivered the fatal rounds would continue for decades, with both pilots' claims supported by different evidence. But the wreckage told a clear story. The bomber had absorbed concentrated fire from multiple heavy machine guns. The right engine showed catastrophic battle damage. The fuselage was riddled with punctures consistent with .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary ammunition. Most significantly, when investigators measured distances from the crash site to known Allied bases, they confronted an impossible calculation. Henderson Field lay 435 miles away. No Allied fighter had ever demonstrated such range in combat operations. Japanese intelligence files captured after the war revealed their analysis. Initial assessments dismissed the possibility of a planned assassination, attributing the encounter to coincidence. But as wreckage analysis progressed, As distances were calculated and intercept geometry examined, Japanese analysts reached an inescapable conclusion. The Americans had developed fighter aircraft capable of operating at ranges previously considered impossible. The P-38 Lightning represented revolutionary thinking in fighter design. When Lockheed began development in 1937, conventional wisdom held that fighters should be small, light, and agile. The Lightning was large, heavy, and fast. The twin-boom configuration emerged from practical engineering requirements. Lockheed's design team, led by Hall Hibbard and Clarence Kelly Johnson, needed to mount heavy armament without the structural complications of firing through a propeller arc. Placing guns in the nose solved the synchronization problem, but required locating engines in wing-mounted nacelles. This unconventional layout provided unexpected advantages. The central nacelle housed the pilot, instruments, and all armament, 4.50 caliber machine guns, and 120 mm Pietro cannon, creating a concentrated fire package with no convergence issues. All guns pointed exactly where the pilot aimed. Effective range extended to 600 yards, far beyond wing-mounted guns. The twin Allison V-1710 engines produced combined power exceeding any single-engine fighter. More importantly, having two engines provided redundancy. P-38 pilots routinely returned to base on a single engine after battle damage, an option unavailable to single-engine pilots. The turbo supercharger system gave the Lightning exceptional high-altitude performance. While other fighters suffered power loss above 20,000 feet, the P-38 maintained full rated power to nearly 30,000 feet. But it was range that made the Lightning irreplaceable in the Pacific theater. The vast distances separating island bases meant most targets lay beyond the reach of single-engine fighters. The P-38, with its efficient cruise performance and large fuel capacity, could escort bombers deep into enemy territory or conduct long-range intercepts impossible for other aircraft. The mission to eliminate Admiral Yamamoto demonstrated these capabilities spectacularly. No other American fighter could have made the journey. The Lightning's combat record in the Pacific ultimately validated its design philosophy. P-38 units in the Pacific theater destroyed more Japanese aircraft than any other fighter type, over 1,800 confirmed victories. The top two American aces both flew P-38s exclusively, Major Richard Bong with 40 victories and Major Thomas Maguire with 38. Japanese pilots' respect for the Lightning bordered on fear. Unlike the Zero, which relied on maneuverability and lightweight at the cost of armor and self-sealing fuel tanks, the P-38 was a heavily armed, well-protected weapons platform. Saburo Sakai, Japan's highest-scoring surviving ace with 64 victories, encountered P-38s over Guadalcanal and later wrote, "The fork-tailed fighter was fast, heavily armed, and could absorb punishment that would destroy our fighters. Attacking from behind was dangerous. Their firepower was devastating. Attacking from ahead was fatal. You flew directly into 8 heavy weapons, firing simultaneously. The Lightning was the most dangerous fighter we faced." The strategic implications of Operation Vengeance extended far beyond eliminating a single commander. Japanese naval leadership never fully recovered from Yamamoto's loss. His replacement, Admiral Minechi Koga, lacked Yamamoto's strategic vision and aggressive instinct. Japanese naval operations became increasingly defensive and reactive. More significantly, the successful intercept demonstrated that American intelligence could penetrate Japanese communications security at the highest levels. Japanese code changes following the incident came too late. American cryptanalysts had already compromised the updated codes. The psychological impact on Japanese morale was devastating. If the architect of Pearl Harbor, protected by escort fighters 400 miles inside Japanese-controlled territory, could be eliminated with surgical precision, no Japanese commander was safe. The message was clear. American reach extended anywhere. American intelligence penetrated everywhere. And American fighters could hunt across distances that defied belief. For American forces, Operation Vengeance provided a tremendous morale boost during a period when ultimate victory remained distant. Major John Mitchell, whose navigation brought the formation to the intercept point within minutes of planned time after 435 miles over open ocean, received the Navy Cross, an unusual decoration for an Army officer, but one reflecting the mission's strategic importance to naval operations. Captain Thomas Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber both received the Navy Cross. The ongoing controversy over who actually delivered the fatal rounds never diminished either pilot's achievement. Both engaged targets under combat conditions after navigating 400 miles of ocean. Both demonstrated exceptional combat skill against numerically superior enemies. Both returned safely despite marginal fuel reserves. The technical achievement represented aviation excellence that contemporary European operations rarely matched. Precision navigation over 435 miles of featureless ocean, using only compass and stopwatch. Arrival within 1 minute of planned time. Successful engagement against superior numbers, and safe return despite marginal fuel reserves. The contrast between American and Japanese fighter design philosophy reflected broader strategic realities. Japanese designers, facing limited industrial capacity and raw material shortages, built fighters optimized for maximum performance from minimum resources. Every pound of weight was ruthlessly eliminated. Armor was removed, fuel tanks left unprotected, structural margins minimized, all to maximize speed and maneuverability. American designers faced no such constraints. Abundant aluminum, unlimited engine production, and vast manufacturing capacity meant American fighters could be built heavy and strong. Armor protection, self-sealing fuel tanks, redundant systems, and heavy armament came standard. The P-38, weighing 12,000 pounds loaded, compared to the Zero's 6,000 pounds, exemplified this philosophy. Build the best fighter possible without compromise, then produce it in overwhelming numbers. This industrial advantage decided the Pacific War as surely as any battle. By 1944, American factories were producing aircraft faster than Japanese forces could eliminate them. Pilot training similarly reflected overwhelming American advantages. By mid-war, American fighter pilots arrived in combat with 400 hours flight time. Japanese pilots, facing desperate fuel shortages, entered combat with less than 100 hours. The result was inevitable. Today, preserved P-38 Lightnings sit in museums across America, their twin booms and distinctive profile instantly recognizable. These aircraft represent more than technological achievement. They represent the capability of American industry to design, produce, and deploy weapons that won the war. They represent the skill of American pilots who flew these complex aircraft into combat under conditions that tested both human and machine limits. They represent missions like Operation Vengeance, operations so audacious, so precisely executed, that the enemy refused to believe them possible. Japanese pilots who searched the jungle near Buin on April 18, 1943, found wreckage scattered across a hillside and the body of their nation's most celebrated admiral. As they measured distances, calculated intercept geometry, and examined the concentrated pattern of battle damage, they confronted a reality that shattered their assumptions. American fighters had hunted across 400 miles of ocean and struck with precision that bordered on supernatural. The mission succeeded because Lockheed engineers had built a fighter with unmatched range, because American cryptanalysts had broken Japanese codes, because Major John Mitchell could navigate 435 miles over open ocean within a minute of planned time, and because American pilots could execute a mission of extraordinary complexity without error. That combination, technological excellence, intelligence superiority, operational planning, and pilot skill, defined American air power in the Pacific. And on April 18, 1943, above the jungles of Bougainville, it delivered a message that echoed across the Pacific. Nowhere was safe, no one was untouchable, and American fighters could hunt anywhere their enemies tried to hide. The Lightning that made it possible flew home with nearly empty tanks, having covered 870 miles in 3 hours and 10 minutes. Behind it lay one of the most successful precision strikes in military history. Ahead lay 2 more years of war and thousands more missions. But Operation Vengeance remained unique. The day American fighters flew farther than anyone believed possible and eliminated the man who planned Pearl Harbor. 435 miles, precision navigation across open ocean, perfect timing, overwhelming firepower, safe return. Operation Vengeance demonstrated everything the P-38 Lightning was designed to achieve, and everything American air power would become: unstoppable, inescapable, and absolutely decisive.